Hey gang, and welcome back to Alien Protocols, the Advanced Protocols Data Project. In a previous video, I was talking about signal-to-noise ratio, and how there is a very, very subtle signal that remote viewers will tell you about, that people who have had repeat ET contact will often tell you about, and the signal is, it's hard to describe, but let me first describe some of the examples of this signal. There's a very famous story about Chris Bledsoe, who's a very famous experiencer who's had multiple ET experiences. And when you first hear that someone has had multiple ET experiences, you're like, that's not even possible. You know, it's just too ridiculous. It's too much. But when you do the research and you find out that there are cases that have empirical scientific corroboration and multiple witnesses who have just impeccable credentials, and this is one of those cases where repeat experiencer Chris Bledsoe, who is very well known as an experiencer, had a visit from a scientist and a UFO researcher named Dr. John Alexander. And Dr. Alexander is kind of infamous in these UFO researching circles. And he was down there investigating Chris Bledsoe. And Chris Bledsoe and him were inside, and I believe there were some other people with them. And Chris says, I'm getting a message, I'm getting a signal, I'm sensing they're going to be here soon. And they step outside, and when they step outside, a UFO goes right overhead. And there's multiple witnesses. And Dr. Alexander is kind of a skeptic. He's kind of a skeptic. But he's also the guy who coined the phrase, oh, I can't remember, but it basically means that this phenomena has the ability to see into the future. And anyway, so that's one of those cases where there is a very interesting signal that Chris Bledsoe obviously was able to pick up. And you hear remote viewers talk about this signal, and they call it a gestalt. And there's a way to develop this signal and to improve this signal. And in a previous video, we were talking about a CE5 contact, and someone said, how do you distinguish between the signal and how do you improve that connection to the signal? So that's what we're going to explore a little bit in this video. As we've talked about before, we have a belief that this signal is basically between our reality and this other field, this other something underneath reality that holds up reality. Some people call it the monads, some people call it the oneness, love, the Akashic record. It could be another dimension. Dr. Vernon Neppe calls it the Gemmel. He's done the volumetrics for it. Up here we have solid things like particles, and down here we have waves of probability. Up here, you know, we have all of these things that can connect to this field, like near-death experiences, healing and shamanism and remote viewing. People can connect to all time and all space. Consciousness somehow has an ability to do this. Somehow consciousness and physics combine. UFOs have some way to connect to our consciousness and to our healing. And remote viewers seem to constantly encounter UFOs for some reason. And there is a strange connection to black holes. And if you're familiar with local sidereal time or local sidereal time, then you'll understand the connection with black holes. For some reason, black holes in the event horizon is the widest connection to this other dimension, this other thing, this consciousness field, or whatever it is that is everything. And apparently, if you're part of the planet that you're on, local sidereal time, is facing on the horizon the center of the galactic plane, then there's study after study has proven psychic powers go up. It's absolutely wild. It's absolutely wild. Anyway, this connection between your consciousness and this location, this place, this thing, is that signal that we're talking about. And you have to forget about reality. You have to forget about matter and particles and everything in this universe. You have to relax yourself and focus on not thinking about this stuff. Think about nothingness. And slowly but surely, that connection starts to open between your mind and this oneness. And that's how people like Chris Bledsoe were able to hear and sense the UFO. He recognized the signal. But how do you work on that signal? There are healers and remote viewers who have a very keen understanding of that signal. Well, for me, I try to do a visualization for you, and it's very difficult, but basically I think of all blackness, and then a small little dot will come in. I'll clear out all of reality, and a tiny dot will come in. And then I'll take that dot and expand it into like a field like this, and see what I see inside that window. That's how it works for me. But there's a lot of other things you can do to help and improve and work on your skills. For example, only use verifiable, validatable targets at first. It's really important to use targets that you can find out the results afterwards. How accurate you're being, if you're feeling the right signal. You should know the difference between exercising versus testing. If you're trying to guess one card out of a deck of 52 cards, that's testing. There's no learning there. It's much better to have a growth curve. So do things that are more like exercises, like Russell Targ's ESP trainer for Apple products. Unfortunately, they don't have it for Android yet. Always end on a success. That's something Ingo Swann taught all the time, is to try and end on a success so you always feel that signal. I highly recommend exercising multiple forms at once. So don't just try remote viewing. Don't just try CE5. You should also try healing. You should also try Russell Targ's ESP trainer. You should try multiple things. Training with a partner definitely helps. Having a partner helps to motivate, helps to push you, helps to surprise you, helps to be a unbiased, separate party. Meditating helps big time. Meditating helps big time. And speaking of meditating, boosts. There's things you can do to boost this ability that have been shown time and time again in numerous studies to help, like increasing your theta waves, or what we were talking about earlier, sidereal time or sidereal time, and working during your local prime time. And your local prime time is going to be 13:30, but you have to find where that is on your planet. So you have to get in an app. And there's a bunch of free local sidereal time sidereal time apps out there. So don't pay for any apps. Don't pay for any of this stuff. No negatives allowed. This is very serious, actually. Make no home for negatives, so negativity can rest anywhere within you. And then, of course, with all this stuff, there's ethics and ethical considerations to worry about and consider. So, that's it, guys. This was kind of a long one. Hopefully that helped to explain a little bit more about signal versus noise and signal to noise ratio, and how to try and tap into yours more and more. For me, once again, it's once I clear the slate, once I really feel like I have a clear slate, it's that first thing that comes to mind. And that's it. I go with that first gestalt, that first sentiment, that first feeling, no matter how weird it is. Sometimes I don't know whether it's a conscious or a more subconscious thing. I just go with the first one after I feel like I have a clean slate. And so it's kind of important knowing your clean slate moment, and then it's kind of important realizing your gestalt, your signal to noise ratio. And you will get that more and more over time. That signal will become more obvious to you. It's like a bird call. You know, you recognize the bird call after a while. If you keep seeing the same bird and hearing the same song, it becomes more familiar to you. So, and that is the case with this stuff. So enjoy, gang. and be good. Much love.